Yes, so hello, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm talking about the insecurity of medical devices or the security in the most critical infrastructure. As you have seen, I have set up two of my friends that I was bringing with me, two research projects. These are two patient monitors right there, and I'm going to show a few demos on these two patient monitors live. I will show you some more demos by video because obviously some of the medical devices that we have tested, it's not possible to kind of bring them to an airplane or something. So if you imagine an X-ray machine, for example, that's pretty hard to transport, right, and operate. So we're not talking about these ones, but I brought a couple of videos so far. So I'm pretty happy to speak at Code Blue because when you're looking at medicine, you will have this term Code Blue used in the US, preliminary, and they are using it for a really, really critical event. So this is kind of cool because when you're looking at medicine and you're looking at the Code Blue, that normally means that there is a patient who is really suffering and who might need help. So he might require resuscitation or whatever. So this is a cool opener, I think, for the conference and for this topic. This topic is one that I really care about because I think that medical device vendors need to put security on their agenda. This is why I'm talking about this topic right now here in Japan. I actually have no real clue what security of medical devices in Japan is about. I hope that some of you guys will approach me afterwards and we can talk a little bit about this topic because I think that is really important, and I think that worldwide all of the vendors have problems implementing security in their devices, as I'm going to show you. So I'm Florian Grunow. Just approach me if you have anything during the conference. I'll be here for the conference. I'm from Germany, from the beautiful city of Heidelberg, and I'm working at ERNW, which is the company. This is the agenda. I'm going to talk about the motivation, why I'm doing this stuff. It's a research project. I'm researching medical devices, so it's not my day business for medical devices. I do penetration testing. Medical devices is my research. And I will go over some of the publications that have been done so far from other people in the field of medical devices. I will state the problem. Why are vendors going this way? Why are they not implementing security? And why is this a problem in combination with how hospitals operate? I will show you or give you a clue if you want to get your hands on these devices to test them for yourselves on how to get these devices because they're difficult to get, obviously. X-ray machines cannot be bought just like that. And so you need some kind of trick to get your hands on the devices. I will then present the findings that we have so far, including the two devices in front, and then we will hopefully have time for questions afterwards. Okay. So if you see any product names, I've stripped them out, I guess, or company names or brand names or whatever. Yada yada, that's the disclaimer I have to do. Why am I doing this is like the first part or the really important part in this presentation. We at ERNW have this kind of motto, which is make the world a safer place. And I could not imagine a topic more relevant to safety and security than medical devices. So the importance of this research is that we trust these devices. If you're going to a hospital, if you're in a hospital bed and you're really, really sick and you're ill, then you're not starting to think about if you can question this device. You trust the data that is on the device, and the doctor is trusting the data that is on the device. So this is the first part. We are not going to question this because if we are in a critical condition, we kind of need to rely on these devices, and the doctors to do this too. So concerning the technology part, this is really awesome stuff. If you look at the devices, none of them are the same. Every vendor is implementing proprietary protocols. They are having like machines like MRIs or something, which is really rocket science for me. And I really, really enjoy just looking into these technologies to play around with these technologies. Yeah. So this for the motivation. Why am I doing this? Publications so far. So there is a pretty important publication from the FDA, from the Food and Drug Administration in the US. They have put out a recommendation for all medical device vendors in 2013. It took like 2013 for the FDA to come up, or they have to come up with a recommendation to tell the device vendors to look into cyber attacks and to kind of look or have a focus on cyber attacks and put safeguards into their machines. So you can imagine up to 2013, none of the vendors really had the impression on what could happen in concerning cybersecurity. Okay, so the next one you might probably know is a publication from Barnaby Jack, who passed away a few years ago. He has done intensive research on medical devices, for example, cardiac defibrillators, implantable cardiac defibrillators, or Medtronic pumps, which is an insulin pump that could be hacked, and he was able to kind of adjust the dose from the outside. Then we have a publication or an alert, which is quite interesting too, because this sums up pretty much where we are with security in the medical device field. Researchers have looked at 300 medical devices, and they have found from like 40 vendors, and they have found hard-coded passwords in all of them. So this is pretty much where we are, this is the status of medical device security right now. So we are not talking about IT security rocket science. We're not talking about that there are like exploits that only 10 people in the world can exploit. We're talking about stuff like hard-coded passwords or no passwords at all in these devices that are starting to talk over the network. We have more research concerning pacemakers or implantable cardiac defibrillators, and we have another warning, to say so, from the FDA, or a publication from the FDA, and in 2014 they were telling us that they are now working with the Department of Homeland Security to kind of get into the problem of vulnerabilities, investigating vulnerabilities in medical devices to kind of prevent these attacks from happening in the future. Okay. So let's go into the problem statement a little bit. So where is the problem? So if you look at the old days, you will have devices like these. This is a Siemens Sirecast BS1, and it's basically an oscilloscope. So there is like this dot on the screen going up and down, and it's basically showing data from the patient. It has a needle that is working, and it's like going up and down like on the car, and I think it's built in 1975 or 1979 or something, so it's quite old. But this is the technology medical device vendors are coming from. So this is where they started from. If you look at the back of the device, you can see like there is nothing much there. A parallel port, maybe to adjust the printer or something, maybe do some debugging, but there is no communication or whatsoever. So this is another example. It's a Nihan-Coden Neurofax EEG. And it is used to measure your brain waves. So there is basically a needle that is using ink to write on a paper. So this is like far away from digital or far away from anything that you can imagine what these devices do nowadays. And if you look at this device right here, this device has been used like I think 5 or 6 years ago in a hospital. So this is what German hospitals sometimes have as equipment. They are using it until it basically falls apart, and then they are going to buy new stuff. And the new stuff kind of always implements this new technology that is known as the internet. So coming from the world of how do we do signal processing, how do we do hardware, how do we do all this stuff, we are now at the point where medical device vendors kind of discover the internet. So we have a change right here. They are doing this because they want to optimize stuff. They want to kind of optimize processes. They want to lower costs. So, for example, if you're going to buy an anesthesia device, some of these anesthesia devices have mandatory access to a VPN. So basically, you hook up your anesthesia device to the network. It will open up a VPN connection and communicate to the vendor. So the vendor can look into the device and see what's happening there, if there is a problem or something like that. So this is especially critical for intensive care units. So the patient monitors that you see right here, if they get hooked up to a patient, then you normally have a software with it, and this software kind of gathers the data over the network and then displays all of the data, all of the like 12 patient monitors or how many you have on a screen. So there's only one person needed to kind of monitor 12 of these things, which kinds of makes processes a little bit more optimal for the hospital. We, in addition, have stuff like interoperability. These devices need to talk to each other. An MRI must push the data onto a file server. Additional software must be able to read this data and interpret this data. So we are now talking not only about the devices, isolated devices itself, but they are starting to communicate over the network. So this is a standard anesthesia device right here. So you see kind of a tower, which is the lower part right here, and on the upper part you have a patient monitor, which is the typical setup. One of the patient monitors is this one right here for the right-hand side right here. So this is the normal setup procedure. These devices are basically in standby. So behind these walls there's an operation room, and if something fails, if something goes wrong, then you kind of need to pull out the one device, go to the other device, push back the device into the operation room, attach all the cables to the patient, boot the device, override the test procedure, which takes like 90 seconds up to 3 minutes. And then you're ready to go. So this is how they're working. All of these devices have communication enabled. So as well, the patient monitors as well as the anesthesia device below. So the problem now is that if we consider this change that medical device vendors are trying to push out these features, and maybe even hospitals want these features, we need to consider two things, like the vendor side and our side, basically, which is the customer side on the hospital and the patient side. So are we ready for this is the question. So looking at IT in hospitals, we always, at least in Germany or in Europe, we have the problem that there is a lack of resources. We have, like, if you look at a hospital networks are consisting of different types of networks, so they're quite complicated to manage. And if you have a lack of resource, this always goes at the cost of security, okay? We all know that, basically, so this is just like a natural law. So looking at the complexity on how they need to kind of adjust all of the stuff or manage all of the networks they have, they kind of now being approached by the vendors of these devices that say like, okay, open up your networks, we need to communicate a little bit more, we need access to these devices from other networks, for example. And this basically leads to errors, and this leads to problems. I will come back to this a little bit later. So talking about us as the patients, there is an interesting question, because all of the technology that is on the rise, considering home monitoring, we should start asking some of the questions. So I have a toothbrush, and this toothbrush is sending like wireless data over the network, and I can monitor how hard I push, and if I'm going too fast or too slow or whatever. So home monitoring or personal e-health devices are on the rise. And we should consider stuff like privacy and security in these devices too, because they are usually hooked up to our network. So the first device I'm going to show you is this smart scale. We have been taking a look at this smart scale. It's the scale, you step on it, your weight is measured, you have an application on your phone, and you can push all of the data into the cloud. So basically, depending on what data you measure, this is all going to the cloud provider. So the attack surface for this scale is quite low, because it only boots up if you step on it. So it's not an always-on device. On the time you step on the scale will boot up and do some measuring and push the data to the cloud. So we have been looking at what kind of data is being pushed to the cloud. As you can see, probably not, but this is an HTTP request, and it's quite big. And if you look at it a little bit closely, you see that there is basically hex in it, right? So the data is going to be pushed into the cloud from the scale. So this is basically a part of a measurement, and it's going, first of all, it's going via HTTP, which is like, okay, so everybody knows how fat I am, might be a problem, might not be a problem, depends on if you care about this or not. But in this case, we kind of recognize this. And if you're familiar with hex and ASCII a little bit, you see that this is perfectly in the ASCII range. And if you translate it to ASCII, then this will fall out of it. So we were thinking about, we know this string from somewhere. And this string is the Wi-Fi PSK of the wireless network that we have hooked up the scale to. Okay, so the scale is sending our PSK via HTTP into the cloud of the provider. So the provider now has all of the keys that this scale has been attached to. So this is a real privacy issue, and yeah, so for us this is like a finding that shows where we are going with awareness, considering e-health devices, health devices in this field for personal monitoring. Okay, so we have been talking about the patients, we have been talking about the hospitals. What about the vendors? So from my perspective, the vendors are doing the same mistakes again. So there is no learning curve. Like, we have gone through this with Wi-Fi, WEP. We have gone through this with car keys that could be replayed. The industry learned. So it feels a little bit like exploiting in the old days, and sometimes it's really easy to get into these devices. So again, I'm not talking about zero-day stuff that needs chaining of 3, 4, 5 privilege escalation exploits to do something on these devices. It is as simple as hooking up Telnet and going into the device and doing whatever you want to do. If you ask the vendors, you get interesting results. So I was on a big fair, and I was talking to medical device vendors, and I found a device that had a network plug, a network port on the back of it. And I was asking the vendor, okay, this device has a network plug, what are you doing with it? And the answer he came up with was like, yeah, we're not really using this port right now. It just came bundled with the board that we implemented in there. We're not using it at all. We have no idea. So I bet if you just go there and hook up Telnet and go onto the device, then you basically can manage the board that is built into these devices. Some of the vendors, there's one vendor who is developing anesthesia devices, and they are supplying their new anesthesia devices with Internet Explorers. So you have like this normal UI where you can do your stuff as an anesthesiologist, and then you have an Internet Explorer running, and you can, like, I don't know, browse the internet, ask some questions if you're in a problem during an operation or whatever, and they are stating, okay, that's no problem, we have Internet Explorer on it, yes, we know this, but it's not a problem. We have like 2 network interfaces. One is for the trusted communication into the hospital network, and one is for the internet, so we are fine, we don't need nothing to do, everything's fine. Yeah, so this is the state where medical device vendors are right now. They are pretty good in developing all this crazy stuff to measure your data, to get out all of the data and process this data. This is where they're coming from, and they're really, really good at doing this. And now this new thing, internet, is showing up, and they need to come up with features for it, and they are not really thinking into the right direction, especially considering security, from my perspective at least. So you might ask the question, don't you need to be compliant somehow? Is like security should be related to safety? So is there not like something for compliance that you need to fulfill to kind of throw these devices out? And is security not one of these things? Well, the problem is it is not, actually. So normally safety and security should go together. If you cannot provide security, you cannot provide safety. In Germany, we have this one problem that we don't even have these words, security and safety. We only have one word for both, which is called Sicherheit. So we do not even distinguish between security and safety. And if you approach German vendors or the guys working in hospitals and you are asking them questions about, okay, how do you do Sicherheit in your devices? They will come up with, yeah, we are redundant, we have backups, that's no problem, we are completely compliant. But nobody is thinking about the security aspect of Sicherheit, the German word Sicherheit. So that's one problem in Germany. I thought that when I was starting this research, that safety will work in these devices. I'm not sure anymore, actually, because I had this one thing where I was looking at a high-end patient monitor, which costs like, I don't know, 15,000 euros or something. And it's a patient monitor that it's like state-of-the-art. And it has this one bug that it was showing an asystole alarm, which basically means your heart just stopped when the patient was actually fine. So the patient was perfectly fine and the monitor was displaying, oh my God, start like code blue, go out there, do something because the patient is dying right now. So, and they were just like, when I was asking about this bug, they were just like, yeah, we have this bug, we will fix it in like 3 months or something, we will have a release and it will be no problem. So considering that features increase in medical devices, also the attack surface increases, and also these devices will be going to fail, because it's not even like it's not the oscilloscope anymore. It's like a real complex system. Okay, so safety mostly works, I would say. Does security? Concerning compliance, there are only a few. There's only few things that you need to do to be compliant. So the first one is have a proper authorization mechanism, whatever that means, right? So a proper authorization mechanism could be there is Telnet on there. I'm fine. And what you always hear from vendors is, yeah, we don't care about that, because like if you're a hacker, you will always find a way. There is no problem in getting to any device, so we don't need to protect because hackers will always find a way to get in. In the US, you have to fill out the form to get your device onto the market. And looking into compliance, this 510K form, it's called, always assumes that there is no hostile environment for the device. So it just preliminary assumes the doctor will not harm the patient will not harm himself or the doctor, and there is no hostile environment. So the device is just like considered for itself. And looking at certification, stuff like that, the focus is on safety too, a clear focus on safety. So to sum up the problem a little bit, we have little resources on the customer side, be it the patient who cannot consider which device is secure or not, because if he is confronted with a device, he probably is ill or sick or seriously injured, and he's not going to think about how secure is this device that I'm going to be hooked up to. And the customer, on the other hand, is the hospital too. So hospitals have a lack of resource, and they are basically also left alone with this issue. So a hospital in Europe is not able to kind of patch the devices for themselves. If they see there is no antivirus installed on one of the devices, they cannot install antivirus. Because if they do this, then by law, they will be liable for everything that happens with this device. So you cannot change this device because you're liable afterwards. Safety versus security is another topic too. They try to do safety well, but they forget that security impacts safety too. So considering all of these facts, this is really serious in my opinion, and this could actually kill you. So we will be looking at some of the targets. What have we been looking at so far, and what is on the horizon, what are we looking at? If you are wondering how does it look like if you're doing a penetration test in a hospital, this is basically how it looks like. Normally we get to sit in server rooms, and it's pretty loud and cold. Looking at hospitals, this is a little bit more relaxed. You can sit in the patient's bed and then just hook the devices up and start testing from there. So what we are looking at is it's clear medical devices with enabled comm, everything that's communicating over the network. Communication is in places you would never suspect. There are prosthetic limbs that have an app, and you can do a Bluetooth connection from your phone to your prosthetic limb to kind of adjust the limb a little bit. As I told you, my toothbrush has enabled comm. There are external cardiac defibrillators that have communication-enabled proprietary wireless communication. So there is communication in places you would never suspect. If you want, you could do a severity rating. So all of the stuff that is used for monitoring basically is low severity because it does not directly harm the patient. Medium is stuff like diagnostics. So if you're going into an X-ray machine or something and you can adjust the dose as an attacker, this could be critical too. And high is everything that has a feedback to the patient, for example, syringe pumps, cardiac defibrillators, stuff like that. This is really, really critical stuff. So monitoring devices, 2 of them are right here. There are more on the market. Diagnostic devices, most interesting so far to me has been the MRI, which you see on the left side. On the right-hand side is an X-ray machine. I would not recommend testing an X-ray machine unless you know exactly what you're doing, because it's an X-ray machine and you can harm yourself if you kind of misadjust doses or something. If you test an MRI, the only thing that can really happen is basically that you crash the MRI and that the MRI dies, and that will cost like $1 or $2 million, but at least nobody gets harmed, okay? So if you're going into this, stick to the radiology stuff that is not using X-ray. We have then stuff that is having feedback to the patient, for example, implanted cardiac defibrillators, anesthesia device in the middle, and a syringe pump on the top right. So it's, for us to test these devices, it's quite hard to get the hands on these devices because now vendors have little interest that you test these devices. I'm in a near lawsuit right now because I was reporting a security issue in a medical device. One of the demos that I'm going to show is about this device. And so it's really, really hard to get your hands on. The stuff is expensive. It really, really costs a lot. As I said, there are patient monitors that go up to $15,000, $20,000. So this is not something that you do in your spare time when you go to Amazon, click buy something and then test it. So this is not working. So what we do when we test medical devices, we try to get into cooperations with hospitals. So we ask the hospitals, okay, we test your stuff for free. You give this stuff to us. We can consult you if we think that we might encounter problems, stuff like that, because you need to interpret the data that you see as a pen tester. You can't just like go for it. You need to know what this device is doing. And on the other hand, the hospital kind of gives us the right to publish the research or keep the research and get in touch, get in contact with the vendors. So this is a deal that we are having with 3 hospitals right now in Germany, and this is working out pretty well. So you can imagine these devices are hard to test, but they are a lot of fun to test, and it's really, really amazing stuff. So we are going into the targets that we have been looking into so far. So this is just a quick wrap up to kind of give you an impression on how medical device vendors do design and architecture in their devices. This is nothing that is really security critical, but this is how basically all of the other security critical devices work too. So an EEG is used to measure your brain waves, and it's basically just a gray box and a software on a host system. So you have a normal PC and this gray box that you see right here. And this box is basically communicating over the network with the host system. And it's doing this via UDP, so it's just sending out the data, and the host PC is sending command strings to the EEG to kind of adjust the measurement, start measurement, stuff like that. There is no authentication, no encryption at all. So this is not critical, because the data that is going over the line is not that critical that it like impacts the patient's safety directly. But this shows how these vendors kind of think when they are implementing this stuff, because you could apply the same pattern to the patient monitor that I have right here. This is pretty much working the same way. If you're interested in EEGs, in doing this stuff yourself, doing crazy biofeedback stuff like controlling your laptop in a restricted way with just your mind, then you can take a look at the OpenEG project. You can build your own EEG, which you can see right there, the black box in the middle, and you can basically use it to do basic stuff on the laptop and move stuff around, something like this. Pretty amazing stuff. So concerning the vulnerabilities that we have found, I will not do a full disclosure here, obviously, because the patch process for these devices is critical. And most of the times, some of the vendors are not able to patch these devices. So I will not do full disclosure here and tell you how every attack works. I can promise you that most of the attacks are not rocket science, right? But I'm not going to do any details here on what will be happening. So I will start with the first patient monitor that I have. It's widely used in hospitals, so the normal stuff that you do with a patient monitor is you hook up a patient and then it will display some vital signs. For example, the oxygen saturation in your blood, which is one of the most critical patient data that you can have, blood pressure, temperature, respiration, stuff like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do an attack on this monitor right here. For this, is it possible that you turn off this light or the first line? Is it possible to dim this a little bit down? To see if this is... Okay, but you should be able to see it. Yeah, now it's okay. Now it's okay. So you see the patient monitor right here. I will go a little bit more full screen. And you see that it is working, so it says like there is some data there. There's no patient hooked up right now, so there's no data incoming, but it's working. If I'm turning this knob, you see that there's something happening on the device. I can click and it does what it is supposed to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is show you a basic attack that can be used to nuke this device off the network. So we are talking about a classic denial of service attack right here, but denial of service on medical devices kind of, as you can imagine, has a larger impact than on any other infrastructure than I can imagine. As I told you, if it is possible to kind of nuke this device off the network and to make like the data that is displayed or make the data just disappear, you will be running into problems if you are in the middle of an operation and you need this data to kind of do your stuff. Okay, so okay, let me think for a second. Let me first hook up to the monitor, then I will just launch the denial of service. Okay, what you should see now, if this is working, is that the monitor basically reboots. There you go. So this is happening all over the network, and it's even working by broadcast. So it's not even a directed attack. I'm just flooding the network with broadcasted messages that are used for these devices to communicate with each other. And as you see, the device reboots. And as you can see now, the device rebooted, but it's not usable, right? So there's nothing, I can click anything I want, it's just not usable. So you see that there is like some strings on the top of the screen, the device is frozen and it's not usable again. So what you would need to do is reboot the device, but as long as my attack is running, there will be no data displayed on this device. So if I stop the attack, it comes up again, beeps, and there it is again, and it boots, and it's perfectly fine again. So you see that with like small effort, you can nuke one of these devices off the network, and as it is a broadcast attack, you can even nuke off all of the devices that are in the network by just running this one small Python script. Okay, so there is another thing that I was going to show you. What we managed to do on this device, I'm not going to show this because it takes a little bit more time, and I have more demos that I want to show you. So the next thing that we did was, there is on the upper right corner, there are alarm boundaries. These alarm boundaries are now set to like legit values, like 120 for the upper boundary and 60 for the lower boundary. And they kind of describe the alarm boundary where an alarm will be triggered when your heart rate goes too slow or your heart rate goes too fast. All right? So legit case, if the heart rate is too fast or too slow, something is wrong, I want the device to trigger an alarm. And we managed to set these higher and lower alarm boundaries to, like, it's an integer overflow, and you can see that we set it to more than 30,000 for the upper boundary and more than minus 30,000 for the lower boundary. And you can imagine that your heart, well, there is nothing like negative heartbeats, right? So your heart will stop by 0. And if like there is no heart rate, it will be 0, which is perfectly in the upper and lower alarm boundaries, which means that if you're dead, no alarm will ever trigger on this device. So we managed to set this alarm boundary over the network. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show you is my MRI. It's not my MRI, but I wish it was because it's pretty cool stuff. So if you have the chance to visit an MRI, look at this device. It's really, really cool. So what you see right here is the control station of the MRI. So there's this lady sitting, configuring the MRI, looking at the data that is coming in, and you see the magnet and the coils in this circle in the background where the patient is in. So it consists technically simply as like these three parts. It's a host system. The host system is running a Windows PC. Then you have an image processing system which retrieves the data from the magnets and from the coils. And there is a control system which kind of does all the hardware stuff, controlling the coils, putting the table in and out where the patient will be lying on, stuff like that. So we have these three parts. So if you look at it by a network diagram, it looks a little bit like this. You have the host PC, you have a Linux box, which is used for image processing, which will put the data on a hard disk, and you have something like VxWorks that is controlling the hardware of the MRI itself. So we looked at this device. We were pretty conservative with our testing because this thing is always on, right? The magnet of this device is always on. If you manage to switch off the magnet, then bad things are going to happen, and it costs a lot of money for the hospital. So we were really, really careful when we were doing this. First of all, we broke out of the kiosk of the MRI of the control station, and we are now looking at the security center of the configuration of the Windows XP box. So the control PC is a Windows XP, and you see that firewall, automatic updates, and virus protection are basically turned off, which is, in this case, well, it's a Windows XP Service Pack 2. But the vendor stated they will have no problem with viruses or worms or Trojans or whatever because they are using 64-bit Windows XP, so no problem at all. We did a port scan of the host system, and you can see right here, like this is just an example because it didn't fit on the screen. We have like 114 open ports on the control system, right? So the control computer has 114 ports open, HTTP even. There is an HTTP server running. Yeah. What happens when you do this? So if you're port scanning an MRI, bad things can happen. In this case, the application on the MRI crashed. So what you see right here, I mean, this is after a port scan. It is a port scan. We did Nmap, and we just send it to the device, and the device crashed. So this is like the backtrace of the crash right here, which is pretty serious because like if Nmap is able to crash it, welcome to the 90s, by the way. If Nmap is able to crash this thing, if we would have started a fuzzer, we would have blown away, I guess, the complete box. So getting into the host PC is no problem at all. And once you're on the host PC, then the network is open to the Linux box and to VxWorks. You basically just go to the network and use your favorite command like telnet with no password and stuff like that, and just run into the machines, and then there you go. This is especially critical for this component down here, for the VxWorks thing, because this controls the coil and the magnet. And once you're on there, you can perfectly destroy the whole thing, and that would cost millions to the hospital. So we were able to do all of this not through the network of the hospital, like the secured, closed down hospital network, but we were able to do all of this through the guest Wi-Fi that was unencrypted and everybody had access to. So everybody running a port scanner in this hospital in the guest Wi-Fi to this IP address would have crashed the MRI, basically. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to show, I need to look how much am I, it's 13 minutes. Yeah, I'll show it anyways, whatever. I'm going to show a video about a pump that we have been looking into, a syringe pump. Okay. So what you see right here is on the left side and with toilet paper obfuscated syringe pump. We obfuscated it with toilet paper because we were not able to get it out of the hospital to kind of do demos, and we had to film this in this session right away. So what we did was kind of obfuscate it so you don't know the vendor exactly. If you're into medical devices, you know what vendor it is because it's one of the few vendors that has some of the features that I'm going to show you now. Okay, so what happens is if you look at the video, then you have like the syringe pump. The syringe pump is working right now. It's pumping stuff into the patient. And if you want to change something on the device, you need a code. There is a security code, which is like perfectly valid because you don't want anybody to kind of switch on the doses or put them higher. So what we did, you see there is a code missing. So what we do right now, it's a little bit bad to see on the right side, is we are attached to the pump over the network, and we are trying to retrieve the pin of the pump. There are actually two pumps right now. One is above. You can't see this because it's obfuscated. The lower one right there. You see that we have extracted the pin over the network right now. I'm entering the pin, or at least trying to enter the pin right now. You see it's perfectly unlocked right now, and I can adjust the dose to like a lethal dose for the patient, going from 0.3 to 200 milliliters per hour, whatever, and you see that the pump is now configured and ready to work, right? And this is all done over the network. Okay, so next target. Yeah, so the next target I'm going to show is an anesthesia device. Anesthesia devices are, from my perspective, the most critical stuff that you can get your hands on because it's controlling your breathing during an operation. And if you are able to stop this or influence this as an attacker, that means instant injury to the patient. Thank you. Okay, so I am going to show this. Okay, so what you see right here, maybe I will try to turn on the sound. I don't know if this is working. So what you see right here is the anesthesia device, and I don't know if you can hear this. So what you see right here is that down below there is like the patient so there is oxygen delivered to the patient. You see that there is a pump going up and down. Everything's fine. If you look at the, there's an audio cable. Oh, okay. Ah, yeah, there it is. Okay, I will. Okay. I'll go back. No audio right there. Audio. Maybe I need to, no audio. It's not working. I will switch back to my microphone. Yeah, no problem.
You can also use the hand mic. Should be a hand mic.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
See if that one is on.
Is this working? Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we'll do it like this. Okay, so you hear this? Yeah, okay. Okay, so what's happening right now is I'm going to show you that the device is working. You see that there is data on the screen. So we're in the normal operation, data on the screen, no problem at all. Now my colleague is going to attack the device over the network. You might hear some typing now. That was the return. And if we go back to the device, we see that it is frozen. Okay, so the device is not working anymore, and you don't hear an alarm. So what the anesthesiologist is doing, if he's not looking at the device right now, he won't recognize that something's happening right now, right? Okay, so this device luckily has something like, well, luckily, I don't know, because if you look at the device, then you see that breathing is still working, all right? So the backup is still working. The UI is frozen, no data is displayed, but still the breathing is working. And what happens now is that we exhausted so many system resources on this device that even this fallback is not working anymore. You will see that the gray pump will drop down. There you go. And then it hangs. You hear an alarm. And basically the device is unusable now. You need to switch it off. to kind of get it back to work again. Okay. So, as I told you, in this situation, this is pretty bad, right? Because you're in the middle of an operation, you just don't realize for a few seconds that that there is something wrong, that the device is malfunctioning, and then all of a sudden the device just freezes and you can't do nothing. So the only chance that you have right now is unplug the device, reboot the device. That takes up to 19 seconds, even if you are not going to if you override the machine, if you override like the tests that the machine has to do before it is coming up. And this takes a lot of time. So you can imagine what this means during an operation for the anesthesiologist. Okay, so now we are going to look at the second device that I have with me. The second device is also a patient monitor, and it basically consists of two parts. One part is basically it's two ARM boards that are built into this patient monitor. One of it is used for signal processing, and the other one is used for like displaying the UI and stuff like that. So they both look like this. Two boards, one here, and they have like different stuff to do. So basically the setup of this device is the same as the one I've shown you before. Okay, so now we're going to do a few demos on these devices. And for this demo, I need my volunteer, because I need vital signs to show you. Okay, so just sit down right here, please, and just lend me your vital signs. Just one finger, please. Yep. So, okay, perfect. So I will switch to the camera. Okay, so what you see right here is the device, the patient monitor. You see an oxygen saturation of 99 or 100, which is pretty good. So you're doing good. Pulse is a little bit high. I don't know what this is. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is a short demonstration of what I call the James Bond scenario. So the realistic scenario that we need to care about, and I can't stress this enough, is like the stuff that I've shown before. Denial of service, like by a port scanner or stuff like that, that may be happening by incident, is something that we need to care about. But we can go, or we can push this a little bit more to kind of go into a James Bond scenario. So imagine this young lady right here is a VIP, and she is on an intensive care unit right now, which I hope doesn't happen to you, but anyways, we will just think about this for a second. So she's protected by guards at the front door, and the evil hacker kind of wants to sneak in and kill her, and does not want anybody to recognize this on the system, okay? So what I'm going to do right now is, What I'm going to do is first of all, I'm going to switch the network to the second monitor. We are already connected. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going into the device right now, and I'm going to record her vital signs. So in the moment that I will kill her, I will just replay the vital signs and hope that nobody will recognize. So I will start recording right now, which takes a few seconds. We should be fine right now. Okay, so I will detach the patient. So this is basically when she's dead. You see a flat line, right? So this should be the case when she's dead. And if everything goes fine, I will blank the monitor so you can see something's happening now on the monitor. And I will shortly replay her vital signs. So everything's fine again. Even if there's no patient hooked up to this device, you can see that it is perfectly working, right? Okay, so this is a classic replay attack on the device. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So what else can we do? Okay, so I will show you a little bit more what I can do with this device. I need to, for this, I will just deactivate my output for a second. Okay. Okay, so that you see that we're not only able to replay this stuff and replay something on the device, I'm going to go a little bit further right now. Thank you. I'm going to so where is, there we go. Just give me a second. Okay, so that you believe me that we have full control over this thing, I'm going to try to do additional stuff now, which should kick in a few seconds. There you go. So we even can play videos on this device and even rickroll like the anesthesiologist during an operation and display like whatever we want on it. Okay. So that means we have full control over the device. Okay, so there is more. We have, there is software with this device that comes with this device. We can inject into this software. So if you're going to use the legitimate software and display your vital signs that you see right here, it is possible for us to kind of get into the data stream, knock off the device off the network. Like we can do an additional denial of service for this device too, like for the other one. And we can inject our own stream to display whatever we want on the screens that are running on the intensive care unit. Okay, so looking at the targets, this is active research. We're doing a lot of research. We have a hospital that has like over 111 hospitals in Germany, and we would like to run through all of them and grab the equipment and then to look into these devices. Keep in mind that if you are going to test these devices, that they are expensive and they need to get hooked up to a patient afterwards, probably. So if you do stuff, leave backdoors there or stuff like that, don't do this. Be really, really conservative when you're doing testing, because this could harm a patient even if you just intended to do this stuff for good. Be conservative with what you do. Yeah. So I think, in my opinion, we need to test these devices. You need to get your hands on these devices, and we need to create awareness for this problem. In this case, I think that responsible disclosure is a critical process. It should be used. There should be no full disclosure on how exploits work and how this stuff works, because at the end of the day, depending on the technology that you're using, you can harm patients with these things. It's not about a few bucks or thousands of dollars or whatever. It's about the life of a patient. So go out there, get your hands dirty. I heard there's a hospital around here, right? It's just a few hundred meters away, something like that. So next time you are in a hospital room, just take a look around, take a glance around, and see if there are some network plugs. We will definitely put out more publications, and there is more stuff to come from our side, so stay tuned on this topic. Do some awareness on this topic, and I am now open for questions if there should be any. I think that I have, like, how much do we have left? 7 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that? 5 minutes left, yeah, okay. So, should we go into questions? From my side, I'm done. Any questions in the room?
質問あります方は挙手をお願いいたします。係の者がマイクをお持ちいたします。
Oh, I need to kind of hook up my translator, right? Okay. Just give me a second. Yeah, thanks.
So, I should turn it on.
Yeah, okay.
Channel 2 should be in.
Okay.
Hi, thank you very much. That was a very scary presentation. This kind of reminded me of a research report called, I don't know if you've heard of it. The Is Human was Have you heard of that research? No.
No, not really.
Like it said that in the U.S., 70,000 to 150,000 patients die of preventable human error.
Yeah, so this is an interesting, if I can go into this topic now, because this is pretty interesting. So one thing that I forgot to mention is that if we look at the statistics, then you can see that there is a steep increase of patients getting injured by medical devices. So it's not that they're sick and they are dying because they're sick, because they are dying or being injured because of the use of, or an invalid use of medical devices. And we don't have any numbers right now to kind of see, is this because the devices fail? Is this because there was a hacker on there? Is there a security problem or whatever? So this is a thing that we need to tackle. We have no monitoring at all if there is something happening right now or not. So sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, that's kind of the line I wanted to ask you.
Okay, so yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
so I haven't heard any like a major, like a hacking, in a hospital, a lot of people dying.
Yeah.
But is this happening in a small scale in reality, or is it?
Okay, so what you can say is, as I said, there is absolutely no monitoring on the devices. So the attacks that I have shown you would probably go undetermined. So there's no chance to kind of see why this device failed. Was it because somebody malicious was going into the device? Or was it just like a network failure or whatever? So we don't have this data right now. What I can say is that the James Bond scenario that I was showing now is not the one that we need to consider, because this is a targeted attack, and to make this feasible, you need to know who's the attacker. I mean, if you're a VIP and you, like the vice president deactivated the wireless communication protocols on his implanted cardiac defibrillator in the US, right? Because he feared that an attacker might target this to kill him. If you're the vice president, you might care about this scenario. I guess that for all of us, this does not apply. So the things that we need to look into is to make these devices a little bit more stable. So for example, a denial of service attack on the network stack should not kind of compromise the system or shut down the system. It's okay if the network stack is going down and if this one's broken, but the data should be displayed anyways, right? So I cannot say that if there is something happening. There was I think 4 or 5 weeks ago, a presentation by some guys who did a honeypot with medical devices, and they just put it into the internet and just we're looking into who is coming by, what are they doing on the devices. And most of the times, the attacker just went in, dropped his backdoor, and then left again. And you could see that the attackers don't really know what they're dealing with right now. So there is a time frame that we have where we can patch and create awareness and do stuff, because I don't see that we have a big peak that we need to care about because people are starting hacking into medical devices and doing crazy stuff, right? We're not at this point yet, but there are medical devices that get compromised, but they're normally used for the usual stuff like botnets and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions?
あとお一人いらっしゃいましたらご質問をお受けいたします。真ん中の方どうぞ。
今回実施されたペネトレーションテストですが、病室のLAN のコネクターに、ポートに LAN ケーブルを挿して、病院内の、LAN のネットワークの、レンジの中でスキャニングをかけて反応した医療機器のポートにめがけて攻撃をしたというデモンストレーションという認識でよろしいでしょうか。
Yeah, so if I understand that correctly, that is correct. So what I did was, so all of these devices need to get hooked up to the network, to the hospital network, because you want the data to be available in all of the rooms, to display them on your laptop or whatever. So what we did was we hooked up to the hospital network, and then in our case, we did not do a normal black box penetration test, so just like enumeration and look what kind of devices are there and then just try to get in them. We had like a lab set up because we don't want, like if you see that the MRI is crashing because you're doing a port scan, that's bad. And we don't want that, right? So we are not scanning like the entire range of the hospital. We had a lab set up. And in this lab, we had like dedicated devices to do a targeted attack. But all of these attacks are perfectly feasible if you just plug into the right network plug and then start looking around. So this is what we did once. We just did like a scan to see what devices are available. And then we basically picked the devices if they look interesting and put them into a lab so we have them in a controlled environment. Because we make sure what kind of device are we attacking and can we clean up the stuff that we did afterwards. That's critical for us. So we always do this in a lab environment. Does that answer your question?
はい、わかりました。ありがとうございます。
はい、フローリアンさんどうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.